Excellent. And what about any people that were at the 2010 Mayor's Job Summit? Would you mind standing up? So that's about really a... What about the Summit Steering Committee? Anyone on the Summit Steering Committee that hasn't stood up yet? So my guess is that's about only 40% of the room. So about 60% of the room is everyone else. So can everyone else stand up that hasn't been to a Summit event yet, either the task force or the steering committee of any of our summits? So anyone that's new to the Mississauga Summit. So everyone that has stood up before, take a look at the people that are now standing up, and during a break, tell them something about the Mississauga Summit. But all of you newcomers, welcome, and thank you very much for coming out tonight. Thank you. One of the sponsors of the Mississauga Summit from day one was Shelley White and the United Way. The United Way has been just a spectacular sponsor of the Summit, a great partner of the Summit over the course of the years. As you know, the United Way does an incredible amount of work in Mississauga, and I was wondering if all of you could thank Shelley White and the United Way for all of their work in Mississauga and their sponsorship of the Summit.
Thanks, Brian. And I'm delighted that there are some United Way board members here. If they could just stand, please, and be part of that recognition, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So Brian and I are absolutely delighted that you could all join us tonight for the 2011 Mississauga Summit. And we'd like to begin by thanking Medtronic of Canada Limited for sponsoring tonight's cocktail reception, where you all had the opportunity to network and get to know each other and talk to us a little bit about what you're anticipating for tonight. And I can tell you there was a real buzz out there, and it was absolutely fabulous, and I think we're all very, very excited about tonight's festivities. Medtronic, in addition to being a sponsor of tonight's cocktail reception, is also very involved in the summit. Geneviève Levertu, who is a vice president with Medtronic, is also a member of our steering committee. And for those of you who aren't aware of Medtronic, they are located now in Brampton, but they had a very, very strong presence in Mississauga and still do a considerable amount of their business in Mississauga. But they develop medical devices and programs to support individuals who have chronic illness. And they are one of Canada's top 100 employers for 2012. So let's give a very warm thank you to Medtronic. You know, the summit is as successful as it is because we have so many sectors of our community involved, including our elected officials. And tonight we have many of our elected officials with us tonight. I have seen Councillor Tovey, Councillor Starr, if you could stand, Councillor Crombie, I saw her come in, Councillor Fonseca as well. Thank you very, very much for being here. Have I missed anyone? No? There she is. Excellent. Councillor Crombie. And a little later, we'll introduce some of our MPPs who are going to be joining us this evening as well. So we're going to start, as Brian said, with an overview of the Mississauga Summit, just so that for those of you who are new can get caught up. So to start, in 2007, we had 300 summiteers. You are all summiteers now, at a meeting called A Meeting of the Minds, Charting a Brave, Bold Future. And our purpose was to bring thought leaders together from all sectors to identify a common set of key issues that our community would benefit from, all sectors coming together, working together. And this meeting, I have to say, was initially inspired by a conversation that Mayor McCallion and Brian had at the Toronto City Summit. And I'm absolutely delighted that Julia Deans is here from the Toronto City Summit and now Civic Action. Julia, if you'd like to stand and be recognized. It was their summit that inspired us to have a similar undertaking in our community. So thank you very, very much, Julia. And Julia and John Torrey and our dear friend David Picot have been so supportive of our efforts, and we're really happy to join up in the new Civic Action Initiative, which is going to have much more of a GTA regional focus. So thank you, Julia, for being here. At the same time, some organizations in our community were doing work with Jay Connors from the Collaboratory for Community Support. And Jay has been working with communities throughout Canada, in Edmonton, Cambridge, Hamilton, and in Mississauga. And his philosophy and research is based on the thesis that community problems and concerns are solved when different groups in the community work together. And he often references the quote by filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola saying that a successful movie results when everyone is involved in making the same movie. Connor says that too often different community groups are working on their own projects with little thought about how their work impacts others in the community. There we go. So in terms of our overview, we're going to provide you with a little bit of information about the vision and the breakthrough big ideas, so that, as I said before, you all have a common fact base. And we're going to provide you with some questions that we want you to think about this evening as you're hearing the various presentations, so that you can give us some feedback at the end. And the other thing is, we want you to all be inspired by tonight. We want this to be an inspirational evening that inspires you to take action. And there's some photos of people that were involved in the first summit. You may recognize yourselves in the photos. So in 2007, we had about 200 representatives from the public, private, and nonprofit sectors who came together to listen and learn and talk about creating an urban agenda in Mississauga. And our three objectives were awareness, engagement, and action. And we had Rick Young from I provide a roadmap for our work. He talked about the power of dialogue, the power of leaps, and the power of courage. And we heard many, many ideas from the various summiteers that were there with respect to creating an innovative economy, in which we talked about the Mississauga brand. We talked about creating a vibrant downtown, a center of excellence for inclusion and diversity, and an innovation center. And then we also talked about mainstream sustainability, such as intensification and infrastructure, and addressing gridlock, environmental sustainability, and developing our human capital. The summit was designed to be a catalyst for developing solutions for the next generation summit for the next generation Mississauga, as we transitioned from being a suburb to an urban center. Canada's 6th largest city with Canada's #1 mayor. I couldn't resist. The Summit Steering Committee, following that summit, had several meetings with key stakeholders, as well as the City of Mississauga executive team. And we summarized the 18 big ideas down into 10 focus areas. So addressing our human service capacity, post-secondary education, fostering economic development, planning sustainable growth and development, identifying environmental business opportunities, embracing our social diversity and the inclusion of newcomers, enhancing our arts and culture and the heart of our city, building a vibrant downtown, waterfront, and parks, addressing congestion, transit, transportation, infrastructure needs, and ensuring that we continue to be a fiscally well-managed city. So those were the ideas. We then talked about those ideas further with the city, because at the same time, the city was holding a strategic planning exercise. And at the end of that exercise, we took the information that we had from the summit and the big ideas and what the city was working on, and the city identified what they were already working on and that were part of their pillars and their priorities, and that's how we came up with the 4 task forces that Brian's now going to tell you about. So Brian Crombie, as you all know extremely well, because Brian is such a dynamic and engaged business and community leader. He's the principal of Crombie Financial Partners and co-chair of the Mississauga Summit with Mayor McCallion and myself. and Brian runs his own financial consulting business, assisting small and medium-sized companies with venture capital, mergers and acquisitions, and strategy. Please join me in welcoming co-chair Brian Crombie.